How's it going, everybody? Noah with Madison Angling, and I'm here at D&S Bait, Tackle, and Fly Shop here on the north side of Madison, coming at you with a Shop Talk video. So I've been up in Green Bay for a while doing some walleye trips, catching a bunch of big fish. It's been a whole lot of fun, but I'm back home this week doing a little maintenance on my boat, doing some at-home things, and I stopped into D&S to grab a couple goodies while I was here, and I figured this would be an awesome opportunity to talk about my top 5 early season bass baits. More specifically largemouth, but I do have my top smallmouth presentation in the mix here as well as a couple honorable mentions. So it's April, we're finally back to normal spring weather. We had that crazy warm up back in March where we had like 60, 70 degree temperatures, kind of screwed everything up. Now we're kind of back to normal, but April, in my opinion, can be some of the best bass fishing of the year, especially for size and numbers. We have pre-spawn fish, things are warming up and they are hungry and they're pretty easy to catch for the most part. So I want to show you guys my top presentations for targeting those fish early spring. All right, spring fishing, you cannot not be throwing some kind of a jig, and there's 2 types of jigs I like to use. So number 1 on my list is a good old-fashioned swim jig. I like a 3/8 ounce for the most part. I'll even go down to a 1/4 at times if I'm fishing really shallow. And you might notice a theme with some of the colors we're gonna show today, but this chartreuse and white is really hard to go wrong with, especially here in southern Wisconsin. I don't know why, but chartreuse and white seems to always work. It's kind of my confidence color. It probably works well because I throw it most of the time. Does color make a difference? I think sometimes it can, but chartreuse and white, you can't go wrong. It's kind of a neutral, normal bait fish pattern, right? It could be a bluegill, a shad, whatever you want it to be. But tipping this with some kind of a piece of plastic, you know, you can put a curly tail grub on it. I know there's different specific plastics designed to go on the back of both swim jigs and bladed jigs, which we'll talk about here in a second. But basically, just little hops and a straight retrieve, just kind of pop, 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 pop along over the top of the emergent vegetation, and they absolutely smash these things. So a 3/8 ounce swim jig, even down to a 1/4 ounce swim jig, is an absolute crusher here in the spring. So kind of evolving off of that, even though I could group these into basically the same bait, but they are different, is a bladed jig. And I have really no preference on brand as far as bladed jig goes. These new Chatterbait Evos are pretty darn cool looking, kind of some upgraded components. The one thing I like about this is it has a plastic keeper actually molded onto the shank of the hook. I don't know if we're gonna be able to see that or not. It might be hard to see, but if you get a chance to stop in here, check these out. They're super cool. One of the biggest issues you run into with swim jigs or bladed jigs is having your plastic trailer kind of sliding off the hook. These have that taken care of. There's a little wire keeper like we have on most walleye jigs, as well as this barbed molded on section halfway down the shank of the hook that kind of locks everything on. And obviously with these, just a straight steady retrieve, thump, 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 whack. It's hard to beat a chatterbait, even on cold front days. These work really, really well. So I basically always have at least 1 or 2 rods in my boat rigged up with a bladed jig of some kind in the spring. Okay, things with treble hooks on them. We like treble hooks. Treble hooks do a good job of hooking fish. My number 1, if I had to pick one bait to throw for early season bass, you know, even late March, but especially April rolling into May, one bait, what would you guys guess it is? It doesn't matter, I'm gonna show you anyway. It is a lipless crankbait. I love the Strike King Red Eye Shad. These things kick ass. They are awesome, awesome baits. Now I'm gonna throw in there an honorable mention while we're at it. The good old Rattlin' Rapala, old school, the OG. This thing absolutely crushed last spring on days where I was still catching fish on these, but it seemed like I was getting fewer and fewer bites throughout the day. I'd switch over to one of these. I don't know if it's because this is a sinking bait. I mean, they both sink, but this one sinks quite a bit faster. Maybe this one was getting down a little quicker, or to maintain kind of where it was in the water column and not dragging bottom, I was fishing it a little faster, so maybe I was getting more of a reaction out of those fish. Not totally sure. But a lipless crankbait, just straight retrieved, absolutely smashes in the spring. And even though it's kind of a quick presentation, you know, it's something that's constantly swimming, moving through the water, and these cover water actually pretty fast, they absolutely pound these things. So Strike King Red Eye Shad, pick your favorite color. For me, I really like anything kind of chartreuse or bluegilly, like this guy. That thing looks absolutely killer. I mean, that's gonna crush. But anything, you know, perchy, bluegilly, or kind of that like chartreuse or white in southern Wisconsin absolutely smashes. So lipless cranks are my first bait with trebles here, but you have to have those in the boat. That's what we're throwing probably 90% of the time, are lipless cranks, straight retrieving them over the top of the weeds. And going along with the jerkbait, crankbait stuff, jerkbaits, some kind of a suspending jerkbait. I'm a big fan of the Rapala shadow wraps and obviously husky jerks. This is taking the shadow wrap and X wrap basically to a new level. So this is the new PXR Maverick 110 by Rapala. This thing is basically a super dialed cross between an X wrap and a shadow wrap. And I've had a chance to fish these for a little bit. We've been doing some damage on them, throwing them up on the Wisconsin River for walleyes, but these are a true suspending, just absolutely dialed jerkbait. They're not cheap. So if you're running these, make sure you run some kind of a light leader. I like a light titanium leader, which I will have linked in the description below. I have a video showing you guys how to make those, so you don't lose these things to hammer handle pike in the spring, because these things are like 15 bucks a crack. They're not cheap. You don't want to lose them, but they're worth the money. And anybody who fishes jerkbaits know usually the more you pay for a jerkbait, kind of the better they run, the more true suspending they are. That's not to say you can't buy yourself some husky jerks and add suspend dots to them and change some hooks to get them to suspend, but it's kind of nice to not have to mess around with that and just pull something out of the package that is going to work. So these new Mavericks by Rapala, check these things out. Again, they're not cheap, but in my opinion, they're worth every penny. All right, so we have another honorable mention here. I know if I don't bring up some kind of a square bill or shallow running crankbait, I'm gonna get crucified in the comment section. So there you go, the Rocco. This is one of my favorites, one of the OG series. This thing is pretty darn cool. So basically any of these sort of square bill, shallow running crankbaits work fine. If you like the KVD 1.5s, those work awesome as well. I like those too, I use those as well. But I do work with Rapala, so I like to throw as much of their stuff as I can, but I also need to catch fish. So any kind of a square bill, something that runs in that like 3 to 5 foot range or so, you can kind of slow roll. It has a nice tight action. The key with these is something that you can fish kind of slow and pretty shallow. So what's nice about these Roccos is they are balsa, they do float. So if you're ticking bottom, getting into the weeds and stuff, you can kind of just slow down and they'll float back out of the weeds or out of the rocks, whatever kind of structure you're fishing. So I do like these a lot for that. And they're sweet baits. They run great. So square bill, something that runs in that 3 to 5 foot range. Gotta have these as well. So honorable mention because I don't throw these all the time. I catch more fish on the lipless stuff and the swim jigs and stuff, but you gotta have these as well. So swing in, grab a couple of these. Okay, last but certainly not least, we gotta talk about smallmouth, right? Smallies in the spring can be a little bit tricky, especially on lakes. My go-to #1 bait for doing this, my buddy Brian Zupke, by the way, who also guides here in Madison, is a smallie magician, especially in the spring. So he kind of turned me onto this a couple years ago because I didn't really spend a lot of time smallie fishing in the spring. I mostly did largies because honestly, they're a little easier. The tube. The good old-fashioned tube. This is the piece of soft plastic that I fell in love with when I was a kid because you can rig these just about any way you want to. If you want, you can Texas rig this thing, fish it weightless, squirm it around on the surface kind of like a frog, mid-water column, drag them on the bottom, whatever you want to do. These things are incredibly versatile. But generally speaking, in the spring, we're fishing these on the bottom anywhere in like 4 to 12, 15 feet of water. A small jig head that fits inside, and I really like these little Howie's tubes, these little bitty dudes. These are basically, I don't know, 2 3/4 inch or so, just under a 3-inch tube. Small baits in the spring, you don't need a giant tube. Those 3.5 inchers, we save those for summertime. So these little tubes rigged up with a small jig head in there, like an 1/8 or 1/4 ounce is usually plenty, and just light little hops on the bottom, just a little boop, 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 and there are even days when we'll just drag it along the bottom, slow and steady on light spinning gear, just kind of ticking rocks, just kind of bumbling around like a little, I don't know what they think this is. Maybe it's a crawfish, crayfish, I don't know. Depends where you are, where you're watching this video. One of those little things with the pinchers on it. I don't know if that's what they think it is, but just kind of ticking the bottom is the key, and fishing these really, really slow. And a lot of times when they eat these things, they absolutely murder them. So a small tube, anything under 3 inches with a small jig head in it. Again, an 1/8 or 1/4 ounce, just ticking the bottom. Smallie crusher, early season, April and early May. All right, guys, one last thing. I know this isn't bass specific, but I got to show you guys this. Pat got some really cool new stuff in here recently, and some of this stuff has been really, really hard to get. So already showed you guys the Maverick, but there's some other really cool stuff over here. One thing that I am really excited about are these guys down here. These have been a Euro special from Rapala for a few years, and we have not been able to get them in the United States. The X-Rap Pedo and the X-Rap Auto. And these were kind of designed to be like mega pike baits, and basically impossible to get here in the States. Pat's got them. So if you guys have wanted these for a while, especially musky guys or big pike guys, Pat has them, come get them. They're probably gonna go pretty quick. In fact, I'm probably not gonna grab any today, but I will be grabbing some of these because I've wanted to get my hands on these for a long time. And full disclosure, I'm sponsored by Rapala and I can't even get these. So I don't know how Pat's guys got these, but they did. So if you want them, come and get them. They have them. Also, Pat, maybe you can tell us more about these little goby dudes. These things look really cool. So if you guys fish smallies, especially in the Great Lakes, you guys probably want to check these guys out. These things are pretty darn cool looking. So Pat, what do you know about these?
Well, it's a goby pattern, and it has, you know, the Z-Man elastic, elastic.
I think you got one over here, right?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, stretch that bad boy out once. See how far she goes. Holy smokes. Just keeps going.
Holy crap.
Let her go.
I'm not even kidding. I stretched that probably. My hands are disgusting because I just redid my hubs on my trailer. So excuse that. I'm not kidding. That's probably a foot long. Yeah. And it goes right back.
Snap, so.
That's sick. And the hook is kind of like hidden there in the dorsal fin. That's cool.
They look great.
So you smallie guys out there, especially Great Lakes, here you go. I know I've been waiting for one of these. And you know what my first thought was when I saw these? Jigging for whitefish through the ice up in Sturgeon Bay. I bet this would smash. Absolutely smash. There's no reason why it wouldn't work down here too. Fishing smallies, it's just like a little nug. So yeah, guys, all kinds of really cool new stuff here too, as well as the Berkeley Power Twitch. So for you live scope guys, Pat's got some of these. Also some swim baits and stuff. The Nessies, those look pretty cool too. So some of this stuff is really hard to find, guys. So if you're looking for it, stop down here at DNS. All the guys here will get you set up with whatever you need. Obviously live bait, line spooling, all that stuff too. Also a little PSA, I'm sure we'll have a video before opener here, but if you are planning on getting your line re-spooled on all of your reels, do not wait until opening day. Don't wait till the last minute. When you come into a shop like this, and you come in with like half a dozen reels and you're like, spool these up, there's a good chance you're gonna have to wait at least a day to get them back. So don't expect that you're gonna get those back right away. In fact, there's some talk that there's probably gonna be a 2 spool minimum, or maximum rather, for people that just walk through the door to get them filled, because it takes time. And places like this are busy in the spring. So if you guys wanna get your spools relined for the year, do it now. Don't wait until the last second. You'll get your stuff back a lot quicker, and it's a lot less of a pain in the butt for the guys who are getting you set up. So hopefully this video gives you at least a starting point. Maybe you're new to this early season bass stuff, or you're just curious what a full-time guide's go-tos are for Southern Wisconsin early season bass season. So with that, share some of your favorite baits down below. If you're looking for some new cool stuff, swing into DNS. They got it. And we'll see you guys on the next video.
Smile.
All right, guys, one last thing. I know that